The Philippines temporarily bans travelers from India as the South Asian nation faces its worst COVID-19 surge yet. Filipinos in India are among those affected by the recent spike in COVID-19 infections. At least 2 of our kababayans there have been killed by the virus. An economist says more ayuda is needed to spur economic recovery, while a group of lawmakers is set to file a resolution seeking a probe into the implementation of the Bayanihan 1 and 2 laws. The first batch of Russia's Sputnik V vaccines are set to arrive in the Philippines today. And let's all take a first look at the Game of Thrones spin-off, House of the Dragon. Fast, focused, and fearless. Here's everything you need to know as you jumpstart your day. I'm Charles Lejano. Over in India, it's not just hospitals that are burdened with the surge in COVID-19 infections. Crematoriums are also overwhelmed with the number of fatalities. And because of this, authorities were forced to publicly cremate their dead in makeshift spaces. Here's the rest of the story.
Bodies wrapped in white sheet, carried on wooden planks, left to burn. Plumes of smoke billowing from mass funeral pyres. This is now commonplace in India's capital, New Delhi, a picture of India's COVID-19 crisis. The deluge of deaths forced India to build makeshift facilities for mass cremation. The country has been battling a second wave of coronavirus cases since March. Official tally logs more than 17 million infections and more than 195,000 deaths. Data from the World Health Organization showed that more than a quarter of new COVID-19 cases worldwide over the past week came from India. The WHO calls the situation heartbreaking.
The situation in India is beyond heartbreaking. WHO is doing everything we can, providing critical equipment and supplies, including thousands of oxygen concentrators, prefabricated mobile field hospitals, and laboratory supplies.
The health sector struggles to cope. ICU beds remain fully occupied, and oxygen supplies run low. Oxygen express trains carrying tankers are dispatched to hospitals facing shortages. And other countries including Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, US, and Singapore are sending aid. Philippine Ambassador to India Ramon Bagatsing Jr. says there are 2,000 Filipinos in India, less than 70 of whom are migrant workers. 2 OFWs have already died of COVID-19.
Last 48 hours, nakakuha kami ng balita na dalawa sa ating mga OFW, as I said, these are managerial level people that have passed away. We're doing everything we can to help out with the remains at tutulungan ng ating mga kababayan dito.
Bagatsing adds, 20 Filipinos also tested positive for COVID-19.
Lahat sila confined, no? Isolated. And after the test, it turns out to be positive. They're isolated. And then we communicate through social media or cell phones, and then they just tell us what they need. And then we find a way to bring it to their doorsteps. Regular naman ang communication namin sa kanila at kung anong tulong ang kinakailangan nila. Dahil lockdown din dito ngayon, hindi rin makakalabas.
Following the Foreign Affairs Department's proposal, Malacanang is now imposing a travel ban on all travelers coming from India or those with travel history to India in the last 14 days. This will be implemented beginning Thursday, April 29 until May 14. Cherry Salazar, we are One News.
The situation in India draws many parallels to what's happening right here in our country. According to Sara Narvades, a Filipino based in India, different states have different lockdown and curfew rules. In Uttarakhand, where she resides, curfew is from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. While some areas like Delhi have shorter curfews, while others have full 12-hour restrictions. Notably, Narvades says they were already seeing a downtrend in cases before the recent surge in cases and deaths.
We're already seeing the bumababa na talaga yung cases, and then all of a sudden we have no idea what happened. Biglang nag-surge, biglang nag-boom, nag-spike yung cases, and basically parang naging complacent din kasi. So parang we're not really, some people are not really properly wearing their masks. And then social gatherings are happening around the country.
Back here on the home front, the health department has shifted to a daily time-based tagging of recoveries. The DOH says this will allow them to accurately and timely reflect and validate the outcomes of cases. Prior to this, the agency's weekly tagging of recoveries drew questions on the integrity of their data. Meanwhile, 5,000 minimum wage earners and OFWs will be getting their first vaccine doses on Labor Day. This after the IATF approved the Labor Department's request for 5,000 shots to be used during the symbolic Mayo 1 inoculation ceremony. The DOLE has been directed to create a master list to ensure the, quote, equitable representation of the labor sector during the ceremony. And the initial batch of Sputnik V vaccines procured by the Philippines will finally arrive today. 15,000 shots will be shipped by the Gamaleya Institute to NAIA Terminal 3 at around 10 p.m. This batch was supposed to arrive over the weekend, but delivery was postponed due to logistical concerns. The U.S. is planning to export 60 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine abroad once it clears federal safety reviews. U.S. President Joe Biden has also pledged his full support to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who is fighting the world's largest surge of infections. Let's hear more of this from this report from Michelle Cortez on Bloomberg Daybreak, Australia.
Is the Astra vaccine going to help in India?
The vaccine will absolutely help India, but it's going to take quite some time for it to have an impact. You have to remember these vaccines, the AstraZeneca vaccine is given in a 2-dose shot, so you need to take them several weeks apart. We're going to need to get them there, and then the immune system kicks in after that. So in terms of the outbreak, the catastrophic outbreak that's happening right this minute, the best way to get that under control is to do the social distancing things, to keep everything clean, wash your hands, try to not be close to other people, limited though that may be in order to have that impact immediately. But the vaccine itself is going to take some time.
Any idea at this point how those shots will be distributed? Who decides who gets them?
Right. Well, so that's so important. The U.S. has said that it's going to distribute 60 million of its AstraZeneca shots because, of course, it's not approved in the U.S. and AstraZeneca has been fulfilling its commitment to the country, but we're not using it. So President Biden is going to start spreading it out. But there's still a huge question of where it's going to go. Of course, we're assuming that India will get a large number of those doses, but there's an equally terrible outbreak happening in Brazil right now. We haven't heard anything about that. The U.S. has already given some of its Astra doses to Canada and Mexico, but those have asked for more. So exactly who's going to get these vaccines and when they're going to become available, those are questions we don't know the answers to yet.
How about the situation in the United States right now where vaccinations are happening reasonably quickly, but some people aren't getting that second shot?
That's true, and not getting a second shot means you're not fully vaccinated, but even one shot does offer some level of protection. We're starting to see much more availability in terms of vaccine access. So many Americans who have been trying desperately to sign up for these shots for the past several weeks, now all of a sudden there's a plethora of appointments available and not as many people who are taking them. So good news, bad news there, because only about a third of America is fully vaccinated at this point. Hopefully we get to that higher, 50, 70% level to reach herd immunity, but who knows how that's going to happen. Even though we're not there yet, many states are starting to introduce measures to lighten up some of the social distancing rules that have been in place, allowing bars and restaurants to open in higher capacity, having state fairs and that type of activity. So summer is coming, people will be outside, and there is this promise of reopening more fully in 2021.
An economist argues that the government needs to provide more ayuda to Filipinos to spur economic recovery. Speaking with the chiefs, economist Emmanuel Leco says more financial aid should be extended to Filipinos, considering that the country is a consumer-driven economy. Leco adds that there is still enough time to realign government funding to do this.
We have to put money in the pockets of the consumers so they can start buying again. They don't have jobs, so what is the logical thing to do? You have to give them more ayuda. 1,000 is not enough. 4,000 is quite big, but it's definitely not enough for this long period of ECQ or quarantine.
Meanwhile, former House Speaker Alan Peter Cayetano is set to file a resolution to conduct a probe into the implementation of Bayanihan 1 and 2. Cayetano says that among those that needs to be investigated is the 4 billion peso budget allocated for the DepEd under Bayanihan 2, as well as how the DSWD distributed the social amelioration program.
Sa madaling sabi, kung anong tama sa Bayanihan 1 and 2, kailangan na sa Bayanihan 3. Kung anong mali, dapat i-correct. Kung anong hindi nilabas ang pondo, dapat sagutin ng gobyerno, bakit?
The dragons are coming. HBO plans to fulfill this promise as it gives us a sneak peek of the upcoming Game of Thrones prequel, House of the Dragon. MJ Marfori with the story.
Fire will rain. That's the promise to throners in the upcoming Game of Thrones prequel series, House of the Dragon. Before the big reveal, God's Twitter has dropped several hints, including a series of fire emoji tweets and GIF images with fire elements. House of the Dragon will take place 300 years before the events of Game of Thrones. It will focus on the story of House Targaryen, the House of Daenerys, first of her name, the Unburned, Queen of the Andals, and the First Men, Khaleesi of the Great Grass Sea, Breaker of Chains, and Mother of Dragons. For News 5, MJ Marfori, we are One News.
And that's how the day is shaping up to be. Join us again later at 10 a.m. as we monitor the day's biggest stories from sunrise to sundown. You can also catch One News on Signal Play. Register for a free account at www.signalplay.com and stream One News live anytime and anywhere. I'm Charles Lejano. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. We are One News.